Shalom, brothers and sisters. Shalom, brothers and sisters. Giving honor and praise unto the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshaya Yisrael of the tribe of Dan of the nation of Israel. This particular teaching, brothers and sisters, is going to be in regards to, as stated, Hebrews, Hyksos, and Meso-Americans, a short matter, part 3. All right? Now, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes, we're going to be getting into the matter with the Hyksos, if we will. And what we want to point out is the fact that some Hyksos were Hebrews, but not all the Hebrews were Hyksos. Okay? What I present, brothers and sisters, as in the book that I wrote, is that the expulsion of the Hyksos by Amos of Dynasty 18 is after the exodus of the Israelites, and that the Amalekites that you see in Exodus 17 is part of those Hyksos that were later exposed, or pardon me, expelled out of Egypt by Amos. All right. So this is something, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes. Now, the term Hyksos is a Greek term from the Egyptian term Hakusoswet, the Greek word meaning shepherd kings, the Egyptian word meaning rulers of foreign lands. Now, brothers and sisters, somebody asked, what does Amu mean? All right. Amu basically means Asiatic inside of Egyptian. That was one of the terminologies. Amu, Setu, Retenu. Those were some of the terminologies that the Egyptians referred to the people that came out of the Levant area. So this is something once it comes down to that. The Hyksos were, according to Shaw, the rulers of Dynasty 15 era. However, they were Asiatic, so the other names, such as the Jahi, Retenu, Amo, Setu, are also applied to them. Now, we want to sit there and speak about this because the people who were called Hyksos did not call themselves Hyksos. All right? That's something we want to point out. In another video, I addressed the fact that there was a person who responded online and was basically saying that, well, the Hyksos were white, and when they were in Egypt, they would have gotten a tan later. But yet the pictures they attempt to show, brothers and sisters, show none of them with a tan. So that's something we pointed out in another particular video, whereas I apologize for that right there, brothers and sisters. I just had to sit there and deal with an email that was very, very important. Peace to the chat from the UK. Let me ask you a question, not to get sidetracked from this. The UK, part of my ignorance, stands for the United Kingdom, right? If I'm not mistaken. Does the UK, okay, it does. Is England part of that United Kingdom? Is England part? See, I don't know Europe too much. I'm coming out of New York, so I'm asking for understanding purposes. Okay, England is part of the United Kingdom. Okay, thank you for that, my friend. All right, so now getting back into this particular aspect right here, the people who were called Hyksos did not call themselves that. So what we want to do is show their land, origin, and so forth and so on, and to talk about them. Let's go on, if you will. The Tanis Hyksos. Now, Tanis was a place in ancient Egypt, in northern Egypt. And I want to pay brothers and sisters, if we will, special attention, all right, with the laser pointer, about how this image looked. You see one of their arms, and what some refer to as cornrows going down or locks or braids. I've heard that stated. All right. So that's something we want to point out for edification purposes. All right. Now, this is, brothers and sisters, part of the Amalekim that the Bible talks about, or the Amalekites that later on were known as the Hyksos. As stated, what I pointed out in a book that I wrote, Egypt Talk and Writing, that the Amalekites that attacked the Israelites in Exodus chapter 17, brothers and sisters, were on their way to Egypt as the Israelites were going out of Egypt. So that's why you can see how one ran into the other, if you will. All right. So I just want to point that out for edification purposes. All right. Let's go on, if you will, to the next slide. Realm of the Hyksos. Hyksos origin, Hyksos conquest. Now, the Hyksos origin, according to this, right, is with the tannish yellowish one around this area here. This black part that you see there with the laser pointer, brothers and sisters, is what we'll call the Nahar HaYarden, which means basically the Jordan River. All right. The Israelites in the land of Israel refer to it as the live sea. The European referred to that as the Dead Sea. All right, which dumps off and leads into the Jordan River itself. All right, so this is something we want to saw. Actually, the Jordan River flows south, and the Jordan River goes more so like the Jackie Robinson in Brooklyn. If you know anything about the highways, it goes back and forth, like a snake kind of movement, if you will. All right. Now, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes, we see here Avaris, which was called Tel El Daba, and also in other times. We see here On, which was called that in the Bible, and On in ancient Egyptian was referred to as I No, and is referred to by the Greeks as Heliopolis. Noth, brothers and sisters, is the Hebrew way of saying the Egyptian terminology Menofer. All right. And so in Bais or Beis, that was just happened to have been another city. But the people, brothers and sisters, that we are speaking of in regards to Hyksos were the people that was all in this area right here in what we call Lower Egypt. The northern part of Egypt is called Lower Egypt. The southern part of Egypt, brothers and sisters, is called Upper Egypt. All right. But brothers and sisters, I gotta apologize because I just got another important message. All right. All right. Let's go on, brothers and sisters. Now, when you read about this part here and see where it says Hyksos conquest, according to this is all the area where the Hyksos had ruled, brothers and sisters. All right. Next slide. Oh, by the way, when it says the Great Sea, brothers and sisters, that's today's terminology to be known as the Mediterranean. The Hyksos matter. Brothers and sisters, this is what we want to point out for edification purposes. Now, a lot of times people would say, well, if you just look and see, this is the standard Egyptian that you see right there. But we want to point that out for several reasons that it's not. First off, the ancient Egyptian men, besides having just one plait of braid coming down as a beard, they were not too fond of having facial hair. That's one. Secondly, brothers and sisters, when you sit back and look at the kind of dress code that they have, the white was more so, as you see there, the Egyptian style of dressing, whereas the Hyksos, we will begin to see, brothers and sisters, came with the quote, you might say, more colorful garments. What am I pointing out is that the image that you see right there of this particular black man on the left-hand side of it would be in ancient times what we today call the Hyksos. That's what we want to point out for edification purposes. The Hyksos were not Europeans. So no disrespect intended to some of the said scholars among the Kemetic community, but we want to emphasize that Egypt or Semitawi has been portrayed as the only home, the only place for the black man, and therefore anything else outside of that must be the white man. That is one of the ideologies that has been promoted. You understand? So we want to point out that the said black man was in different parts of the world and not just to be in one particular area right there. That's why when we call people by the terminology, oh, they're black, that's a broad terminology. You got black people in Malaysia. You got black people in Japan. You got black people in Indonesia. You got black people in China, black people in India called the Dravidians at first. The original Irish called the Grimaldis were black. You understand? So when we just say black, that is a broad terminology. All right. So one of the dangers, brothers and sisters, of just using the term, quote, black as a set name goes into the fact of saying that one, it leads the people to be marginalized. That's why you have a situation now between the said Indigenous American community or the autonomous community and the Pan-African community. Because in one part, you got some saying, oh, well, we black people that you see here in the United States is indigenous only to the United States. Whereas the people on the quote other side are saying that the entire continent of Africa belongs to the black man, so that's all of ours. But if we just say that, quote, Indigenous American was originally black and said African is said black, what about the black people in other parts of the world? That's how we know, brothers and sisters, that black by itself cannot be an accurate name for us as a people. You understand? So hopefully that particular point was understood for edification purposes. All right? Let's go on, if you will, to the next slide. Information on the Asiatics. The first set of Asiatics in Egypt after the Old Kingdom is that of Dynasty 11. Now, why do I say after the Old Kingdom, meaning the Old Kingdom of Egypt, is because, brothers and sisters, in what they refer to as the Old Kingdom of Egypt was in part Dynasty 5. Dynasty 5 was part of the Old Kingdom of Egypt. And you had, brothers and sisters, Asiatics in that particular area. When you go into and study, when you can, about the Scorpion dynasty, which is said to predate Narmer of Dynasty 1, you begin to see about the aspects of the Asiatics that was in there. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. The evidence is the fact that the walls of the prince was built by Amenemhat to keep the Asiatics out of Egypt. Thus, they had to be there prior to such time. Now, brothers and sisters, I want to, all right, if we will, take the time out now and underline this right here. Amenemhat the first was the ruler in Dynasty 12 of ancient Egypt. He built what is referred to as the walls of the prince, or the walls of the ruler. And that was in his way to keep out the Asiatics, who were later known as the Amu or the Setu, or the later on known as the Hyksos, up out of Egypt. So that means he had to have known, since the era before him with Mentuhotep of Dynasty 11, brothers and sisters, that the Asiatics had to already been inside of Egypt prior to Dynasty 12. That's why he built a wall, as we spoke about here, and it's sad to have to bring it to this particular reality. And I'm not anti-Mexican, don't get me wrong, But the fact that you got this fool in the White House talking about building a wall so the Mexicans can't, quote, come over, shows that Mexicans are already inside the United States. The fact that Amenhotep I was building a wall called the Walls of the Ruler, brothers and sisters, shows that the people who were called the Asiatics were already in Egypt. Let's go on. Now, this comes from a scholarly book right here for edification purposes in this particular regard, right? We may describe the typical Asiatic man of the early 3rd millennium BC as bearded with long braided hair confined by a fillet and falling behind the ears. The first set of Asiatics in Egypt after the Old Kingdom is Dynasty 11. Okay, that was a copy and paste from my own self. The Asiatics that came in during that time were called biblically the Amalekites. The same attacked Israel or Israel when we read Exodus 17. The evidence is the fact that the walls of the prince was built by, as stated, Amenhotep I to keep the Asiatics out of Egypt. Thus, they had to be there prior to that time. All right? Let's go on, if we will, brothers and sisters. The second wave of Hyksos came in Dynasty 13, and this happened due to the fact that Egypt was not able to defend itself in such time. Neferhotep III spoke on this. So, brothers and sisters, this is, one more time, something that we wanted to point out for edification purposes about the entrance of the said Hyksos into the land of Egypt. All right? Now, in the book that I wrote, Egypt Talk and Writing, I go into this a bit more in depth, but I just want this to be pointed out for the video for reason and purposes, if we will. All right? Let's go on, if you will, to the next slide. Now, we were speaking earlier about the Hyksos and the Amu or the Set-Yu that were going into the land of Egypt. And this is different images of these said Asiatics that were going into the land of Egypt. Now, brothers and sisters, one thing we want to point out is that there will be people who will say things such as, oh, they had Caucasoid features, so forth and so on. So now, if we were to take that supposed argument, how do you explain this light-skinned person that we see here with the image there of the Negroid lips? How can you sit there and state that? This person obviously is of color. This person obviously of here has what you call the eyes of the Negroes. And this person of here is of color. So when we get into what they try to portray as evidence, when they want to talk about, oh, they had such and such features, brothers and sisters, those features still go back to people of color. There are light-skinned people of color. I remember, and it's a sad situation. It's a sad situation that happened, but I remember having to tell a brother that's light-skinned that I believe many Hyksos would have looked like him, because he asked me, would I believe that the Hyksos were white? And I said no. But that just goes to show that the said, not to be offensive, Kemetic community portrays Egypt, the indigenous Egyptians, as all black man. Every black man's home on earth must have came from there. So therefore, anything outside or alien to Egypt must be the white man. That's a game, brother and sister, that is played in the said conscious community. But this is why we wanted to show the Asiatics being different shades, so forth and so on, and of people of color. All right? Let us go on, brothers and sisters, to the next slide. The Hyksos matter. Now, I remember, brothers and sisters, in the past, having a conversation with someone, and they, after actually looking at that particular picture, believe it or not, sat there and said, the Asiatics were white. The Asiatics were white. That man ain't white. Even if you want to say it supposedly more so resemble, quote, an East Indian, they still ain't white. But this goes back to the point that we want to emphasize, that on how they sit there and portray that kind of ideology and stance. All right. Now, what you're looking at here, brothers and sisters, comes from the tomb of Kemun-Hotep. Kemun-Hotep was an advisor to the pharaoh Senusret, brothers and sisters of Dynasty 12 of Egypt. And this right here is the said in part Asiatic or Amu that was going inside of the land of Egypt. So therefore, the black man exists outside of continental Africa. So let that please be noted for edification purposes. Okay, next slide. This is more so of a close-up image, and as shown, they are Philistine. Now, let's say, brothers and sisters, that what they're saying here of this being a Philistine is correct. We are in the scriptures, brothers and sisters, knowing the Philistines in the Bible don't get what you call much love. They're referred to as soothsayers, diviners, and so forth and so on. So if this is a said Philistine, and the Philistines you read of in the scriptures from Genesis and so forth and so on, right? Is there anywhere in the Torah, for those who say that the Bible or the Torah is a white man's book, where do you read, if this is an image of a Philistine, that they were bad people because of the color of their skin? See, when you read about the tractates or in the tractates of the Talmud, you get into the aspect of what they like to call the curse of Ham, where it said that he has big lips because he lied, and this and that and the third, and his skin color was this because of that. Where in the Torah do you find the tractates that you see like a Rashi inside the Tanakh? You don't see it. Because my point is this: for all of the said hating, if you will, or all of the said bashing, if you will, of the Philistines inside of the Tanakh, inside of the Old Testament, you don't see nothing in there degrading them, if you want to use that terminology, based upon the color of their skin. That was not a Hebrew or an Israelite concept to sit there and look at your skin and bash you upon such. That was a European concept, brothers and sisters. So when you study the book Babylon and Timbuktu, and you read about the guy Blumenbach, you will begin to see, know, and understand that the Caucasoid, Negroid, and Mongoloid concepts was something that was started, brothers and sisters, in the 18th century AD. The ancient nations did not really vie and see each other on different aspects until the coming of the said white man. When you sit there and see the Greeks calling them Ethiops, meaning burnt face. The people, brothers and sisters, who were called Ethiopians, they didn't call the Greeks the pale man. You understand? The natives that were definitely of color in this Western hemisphere, they were more so open to other people coming in. Same thing as you might say in Africa to a great extent. It was the European who really tried to sit there and say, we don't want to sit there and do that, and we're going to call you this based upon your outer appearance. The ancient nations did not judge based upon the outer appearance in that particular regard to say what nationality you were and so forth and so on. Yes, nonetheless, it does speak in the Torah about if there be a white rising in the skin of one flesh and the hair thereof be turned yellow, that right there is what you call negat zarat, which basically means the plague of leprosy. You understand? But that doesn't determine your nationality. Your nationality is who you are, but in spite of your skin color. So the whole color game that has been introduced into the world, brothers and sisters, And us as the people riding upon that cart has done us a disservice in connecting to our brothers and sisters throughout the length and breadth of this earth. Let's go on, if we will, to the next slide. Once again, the Hyksos Manor. Now, brothers and sisters, in talking about this particular aspect right here, you notice the different color garments and how the people look. Yeah, the picture, sorry, does look a little blurry, but Kemunhotep and his pharaoh Senusrit lived over 2,500 years ago. So that can be why the picture looks like that when they sit there and take it. You understand? So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. All right? The white man trying to sit there and squeeze his way in, as far as being the Hyksos, brothers and sisters, is a shame to even his own heritage. But when you're dealing with, like in the Western Hemisphere, when the majority of the ancestors of the Europeans inside the Western Hemisphere, right, are criminals. Did you know that Europe emptied out their prisons and they who were prisoners there, guilty of crimes, came over here to the Western Hemisphere? Did you know that there were no what you call rodents inside the Western Hemisphere? Mice and rats are not indigenous to this continent here in the West. It is indigenous to parts in Africa, Europe, and Asia. But the rats, every rat and every mouse you see in America, brothers and sisters, is a descendant from the mice and rats that the Europeans brought in their exploration ships. This is what we want. This is why they don't want to sit there and get into history. And I'm going to break it down like this. If I were to ask a brother or sister that sits there and follows the channel or who bought the book, if I were to sit there and then let's break it down real talk. Hey, can I borrow $10? If that person were to go and look at my Verizon bill, I don't want you to see that. I know I'm going to pay you back, but I don't want you to see my Verizon bill or my Sprint bill. I don't want to explain why I am now only dealing with Metro PCS because of Verizon bill that I owe. So I'm putting myself in this particular aspect, in that particular regard, because when you look at this man's history, there are certain things he didn't want you to see, brothers and sisters, because of what he knows he has done. And that's why it's hard to trust them. It's not because of your past deeds, Caucasian or even black man. It's because the arrogance doesn't allow you to sit there and say, my bad, let me change. How can I get better? That's why people don't trust you. You don't like me. Oh, you're a racist. Oh, you're a bigot because I'm white. No, it's not because of that. It's not because of the complexion of your skin. You understand? It is because of the ways such as not sitting there and acknowledging the wrongs of what was done in the past. To get a little personal, but not too personal. I now spend more time with my little girl, with my daughter. I had to explain, and her mother had to explain to me what happened between us and why we will never ever be a couple. But we still got to be there for the little one. There's no way to try to sit there, come around and chill in the house, acting like everything was okay. You can't do that. You understand? Somebody asked, did the Hyksos follow the laws and customs of Egypt? Not in totality, my brother. They didn't follow the laws and customs of Egypt in totality. In certain ways, they were Egyptianized, but as far as talking about laws of Egypt, no. All right, let's go on, if we will, to the next slide. Regarding the Israelites. Now, this is what we wanted to get into from over a month ago. You understand? When you get into regarding the matter of the house of Israel, let's go on, if you will. Let's go with the laser pointer, all right? The Israelites were in the area of their land during the during what archaeologists call the late Bronze Age, starting in around 1500 BCE. Why do I mention that? Because those who are said to be critics of the house of Israel will say, well, Hebrew wasn't known in writing until 1000 or 1000, that is BCE. Brothers and sisters, do you know that there are languages in this earth today that is still not written? Did you know that? There are languages in this earth today that is still not written. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So, brothers and sisters, to try to, as some say, well, Hebrew doesn't seem to have been written until 1000 BCE, as if to say that's when the Hebrews or the Israelites came into existence, that doesn't sit there and hold weight in that particular regard. That's the problem by marginalization, if you will. According to Josephus, people in his day thought the Israelites came from the people of the Egyptians. According to Tacitus, the people in his day and time thought the Israelites were from Ethiopian people. Now, brothers and sisters, as pointed out in the past, when you read Before the Mayflower by Laurent Bennett Jr., you do know and understand they referred to the slaves they brought over as Ethiopians in North America. When they got off the ship from Western Africa, they were called Ethiopians. Did you know that? Now, if that be the case, which according to Laurent Bennett Jr. in his scholarly book called Before the Mayflower, which you can get on Amazon, brothers and sisters, citing our sources, the Israelites too were called the same byword by the Romans. So just as the English referred to the black men they had as slaves as Ethiopians, so did the Romans refer to Israelites as Ethiopians. Do you see where we're going with this? Follow along, even if one may disagree at first. Let's see, brothers and sisters, how this comes into play for fruition and for edification purposes. The Israelites themselves stated they came from Chaldea. Now, that's in the Bible when you go Ezekiel chapter 23, verse 15, when it says Chaldea, the land of their origin. Chaldea, brothers and sisters, in ancient times was in southern modern Iraq, not too far what you call this land here of Iraq today, Basra. Brothers and sisters, in what they call Desert Storm in 1991, one of the first things they went to attack was the museums. Did you know that? One of the first things the American government did when they went to Iraq under Bush Sr. was to attack the museums. What were you hiding in those museums? What was in those museums that you did not want to have come out? Why would you attack the structures and the artwork of the people that was there? Could it be similar to the pictures that you find in Susa Palace, where the Persians look just as black as Samor the comedian? Is that why? Because the ancient people of Iran were black. So now, if that be the case, and if we can see that the ancient Israelites, according to themselves, came from the land of Chaldea, which is in modern day southern Iraq, now you can see why they was trying to sit there and attack it. You understand? So these are things that we want to sit there and point out for reasoning and edification purposes. All right, let's go on to the next slide. From Assyria to America. Now, this part here is under the title regarding the Israelites. The ancient Assyrians used to impale and hang Israelites that you see there on the left-hand side. In the country where the Israelites was brought to, called America or America, whatever you want to call it, they were still being impaled and hung. So from Assyria to America, the true house of Israel was being hung in display for the world to see. Brothers and sisters, these are things we want to sit there and point out for edification purposes. Just as much as ancient Assyria memorialized the capture of Lachish of Judah, so, brothers and sisters, did they send postcards out of the black man being hung inside the United States. Let's go on, if you will, to the next slide. The Lord's Jews. Last of the Ethiopian Philistines. Now let's talk about that as to why I posted that book in this particular case. According to their teaching in part, they say that there is a mystical river called, and I'm going to write this in here, Simbatyan River. Now, according to this, they say if you find the Simbatyan River, you will find, according to the said Philistines who call themselves Beit Yisrael, they say that you will find the lost tribes of Israel if you find the Simbatyan River. They say that this river, in part, is in America. All of that is inside of that book. Now, when the Europeans went to the so-called Philistines in the 1970s and into the 1980s, brothers and sisters, and wanted their records of what they state of themselves and why they state what they state of themselves. They said, end quote, they thought all the Jews in the world were black. Now, if according to the Philistines, as they are erroneously called, all the, quote, Jews of the world were black or are black, and they, according to this book that you can also get online, say that if you find the Simbatyan, which they say in part is in America, you will find part of the lost tribes of Israel. Who were they talking about when they spoke about the lost tribes of Israel? These are things we want to talk about and get into for edification purposes. So why do I go into these kind of things like this picture and that book? Is to show evidence and reasoning, and also when they made the statement, and maybe some can say, oh, that brother Yeshaya became in his feelings. But when that guy, to be named anonymous, said the Israelites only cite the Bible, brothers and sisters, I've been teaching on this for over 30 minutes. The only Bible citation that I spoke about was in the book of Ezekiel, and even then, I didn't even cite the whole thing. So we have no problem as Israelites going, quote, outside of the standard text of the scriptures to go and show what we're talking about for edification purposes. This is a book by a person that interviewed the people in Ethiopia that are walking, living, breathing, and talking. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but Ramses being dug up and Hatshepsut being dug up does not compare to the living, breathing, walking people that you can talk to eye to eye, continent to continent. A dead said Egyptian of ancient world does not hold the same weight as people that are not mixed with the Europeans, for the lack of a better terminology, that say they come from the line of King David and Solomon. Did you know when they did Operation Moses in 1984, brothers and sisters, the newspapers try to suppress that as much as possible? That's why I buy the New York Times so I can keep on reading, because when the Daily News, New York News, I live in the state of New York, the Daily News, the New York Newsday, and all these other papers did not want to get into the situation in Ethiopia, in Gondar, Ethiopia. The New York Times asked the rabbinate council and said, excuse me, sir, who are these people in Ethiopia that saying that their ancestry can go all the way back to King David of the Bible? They don't speak English, sir. Who are these people? They speak Amharic and Ge'ez. They don't speak English, so they didn't get any information from, no offense intended, the King James Version of the Bible. So who are these people that are saying, according to the author of that book, The Lord's Jews, about the Sembatyan River? Brothers and sisters, said to be in part, according to them, in America, while at the same token, they said they thought all the Jews in the world were black. Shh. Shh. Don't talk about that. Be quiet. That's the solution, according to them. Let's not even talk about said subject. See, this is why when I could talk about this, and what you're seeing on the left-hand side is inside of Ethiopia. All of them there that you see there are children. You understand? Their parents taught them, and their parents taught their parents, who taught their parents, and so forth and so on. Now, when they went to the land of Israel, certain things happened. Some of them wound up sadly getting strung out. Some of them sadly wound up going into other vicarious kind of ways, so forth and so on. But that's the similar situation that happens when you adopt the Europeans' ways. See? Brothers and sisters, when they say that the said black woman who has a quote natural hairstyle, that her hair looks wild. When they say to the said black man that his facial hair, in a nutshell, makes him look dirty, because they tell us as brothers, just like they tell sisters, you should, what they told my daughter, oh, she should relax her hair. My daughter doesn't need no relaxing of her hair. Her hair is not upset. Just like they tell black women to, quote, relax their hair, which some of the Falasha women have done, sadly, in the land of Israel, getting a perm and so forth. So do they tell us as black men that with our facial hair, you may want to, quote, clean it up a little. My beard is not dirty. There's nothing to clean up. When I wash my face, my beard is included in it. But that beat in the head, and I said lion, quote, Lion, lion, natural state, looks fierce to them, you know? So by us shaving off our facial hair, and I have been doing so due to a job situation, but I want to break this down here. The Hebrew word for beard, B-E-A-R-D, is the word zakwan. Zakwan is the Hebrew word for beard. The Hebrew word for elder is zakwan. See, having a beard is part of puberty, so it's not an accident. One of the things they used to talk against the lieutenant governor who became governor by the name of Patterson in New York was, oh, he looks disheveled. He doesn't look, well groomed. The man had a beard. They tried to sit there and snap on him because of his facial hair. Brothers and sisters, boys don't have beards. So when they want to sit there and say, hey boy, you know what the white man used to call us, and sometimes they still try to do? Hey boy, he can more comfortably do that after telling you for years, you should just clean your face up. Just cut all your hair off. But I want to emphasize again, male facial hair is not an accident. It's part of puberty. To tell a man to clean his face by shaving his hair off is as intelligent as telling a female she should sit there and cut her breasts off when she goes through puberty. Next slide. Israelites in West Africa. Now this right here, Judean Hebrews from Upper Senegal, West Africa. This comes out of a book called Lost Tribes of Myth by Dr. Alan Garby, Duke University Press, 1930. This book online costs, last time I checked, over like $2,000. Lost Tribes of Myths, Dr. Alan Godby, Israelites in West Africa. Senegal is where the Fulani as well as the Wolof people live. That's in Western Africa. That book was written in 1930. And as stated, the price of it, last time I checked, brothers and sisters, was over $2,500. Now, let's look at this picture right here. 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro with Complete Proof by J.A. Rogers. Still, haven't cited the Bible much, so let's go on. According to J.A. Rogers, who was a historian from the land of Jamaica, he stated in this book, end quote, West Africa has black Jews also. Now, let's look at this right here. No, you can't get the PDF for that book. You know they ain't trying to have that kind of book on PDF. My brother who asked or stated can't even get the PDF for no, you ain't getting the PDF for that book. No. Not getting that one. But let's go back into this presentation here. According to J.A. Rogers, he stated in his book, 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro with Complete Proof, brothers and sisters, that West Africa has black Jews also. So West Africa, according to this man here, J.A. Rogers, who also wrote From Superman to Man and Nature Knows No Color Line and Africa's Gift to America, Malcolm X quoted J.A. Rogers. Malcolm X, may he rest in peace, been deceased over 50 years. All right? He said, as quoted, West Africa has black Jews also. Now, this guy here, Dr. Alan Godby of Duke University Press, he spoke about these men are descendants of the ancient Judean, and this part of it is cut off. Their ancestors fled from Jerusalem before and the part of it is cut off. So you can begin to see exactly what this is talking about for edification purposes. Brothers and sisters, these are not things we just sprung up out of nowhere. Next slide. Regarding police matters. Now remember, according to the so-called Philistines, right? They said if you find the Symbatian River, you will find the lost tribes of Israel. What you're looking at on the left-hand side, with the sister there, with this part here, that's in the land of Israel, where the so-called Philistines are having it out with the police inside the land of Israel. Now, what is the difference between them in the land of Israel having it out in a situation with Nicole Bell having it out with the police that was just inside of New York City? Do you see, brothers and sisters, where we're going in this particular regard? Black women, be you come out of Ethiopia or South Jamaica, Queens, and New York, Popo don't like you. They don't respect you. Understand that. Black women, whether you come out of Gondar, Ethiopia, and was flown to the land of Israel in the 1990s or the 1980s, or if you the said black woman that is still inside of Queens, New York, the Popo is not your friend. That is not the one to run the call against the black man. You understand? That's why we need to have our own stuff. Because you can begin to see, brothers and sisters, what kind of conflict, be it in the land of Israel, between the true house of Israel there and the Europeans, and brothers and sisters, our people over here in the West and the Europeans. This is something we want to talk about for reason and purposes. Next slide. Were these people indigenous? Now, why did I go here? After stating, brothers and sisters, a month ago on this same channel. Brothers and sisters, on the same channel about there being, quote, black indigenous said Indians. Why did I go and ask about this here and show a picture of Africa? Is because somebody who, sorry, is, quote, anti-Africa, but trying to cloak it over by saying they are autonomous or indigenous to this place here in the West, took this picture here and actually said to be sold on board the ship, whatever that is, on Tuesday, the 6th of May next. At Ashley Ferry, a choice cargo of about 150 healthy Negroes just arrived from the Windward and Rice coast. Now let's look and see, brothers and sisters, and show where the Windward coast is at. So we can begin to see and show how meme scholarship makes no sense. We just circled it. You see it right there? The Windward coast is right here. And if a person didn't see, brothers and sisters, I want to sit there and highlight it. Here's the Windward coast that you're seeing right there. So if this right here says just arrived from the Windward coast, how are you going to sit there and say that the images and the pictures are they who are already in America without coming from Africa, as some have stated? It tells you if you were to, sorry to have to go there, if you read my brother, you will begin to see exactly what it says right there. So we can begin to know and understand what we're talking about for edification purposes. Next slide, please. When someone says history doesn't matter, and I took the picture of Chris Tucker looking like, are you serious? These books are available on Amazon. Egypt Talking Writing, Hebrew is Easy, Old Testament Israelites Respond, Deuteronomy 28, 15 to 68. All of these books are available on Amazon, brothers and sisters, for those who are interested. The world as known to the Hebrews. Now let's look at this right here and show this is what you call Egypt, Somalia, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and where the children of Israel was after leaving out of the land of Egypt in this vicinity that we're talking about right here. Brothers and sisters, the Great Sea called the Mediterranean Sea is mentioned in Numbers and is also mentioned, brothers and sisters, in the book of Daniel. So, the geography, brothers and sisters, of the land of Israel, the geography of the area where the Israelites were, was already noted. For instance, in the Bible, it says from the rising of the sun even to the west. Now, if, as some try to say, that America here is the true land of Israel, like one person was saying that Jerusalem was truly in the state of Utah, then the Bible would not say from the rising of the sun and from the west. It would say from the east and from the going down of the sun. Because you're going to talk about first the land that your origin is from and what you are used to. So in the book of Isaiah, as stated, when it says from the rising of the sun, and we know the sun rises in the east, unto the west, if the land of America that we're talking about here was the true land of Israel, it would say from the west to the east, not the east to the west. You understand? So these are things you just want to point out for edification purposes. And I want to make a disclaimer because, as stated before, if you claim this land here is yours, and I'm saying my land is over here as shown in the map, I'm not your enemy. I said previously that black people can be found in Indonesia, Malaysia, and so forth and so forth and so on. So if black people extend outside of certain places, brothers and sisters, and I'm saying that my land is over in the land of the east, and you're saying that your land is over here in the west, I'm not arguing with you. You can have it. Why do you debate with me and say that we are wrong? Because we don't want to claim North Dakota that sits there and has winter like you can't believe in the month of December. You understand? So when we get down, brothers and sisters, into this particular subject, these are things we want to point out. Next slide, please. Josephus, Wars of the Jews, Book 7. And here a great number of the captives were destroyed, some being thrown to wild beasts, and others in multitudes forced to kill each other as if they were their enemies. Remember this one here from Django? When a man was eaten alive and attacked by the dogs? The same thing that you saw in Django there is the same thing the Romans under Domitian was doing to the Israelites. Just like the Assyrians were hanging Israelites and impaling them, so did we show the picture of the black man being hung earlier. So just as Domitian, according to the book of Josephus here, was doing those things to the Israelites, such as having them attacked by wild beasts, so Quentin Tarantino, pardon me, knew good and well what happened and showed it inside the movie Django, with the people being attacked by beasts. So in this, brothers and sisters, July 3rd, in several hours, they're going to have what they call their Independence Day. Let's remember what happened with us when they celebrated their independence. Let's go on to the next part. Josephus, Wars of the Jews, Book 7. And here a great number of the captives were destroyed, some being thrown to wild beasts, and others in multitudes forced to kill each other, forced to kill one another, pardon, as if they were their enemies. Remember that fighting scene in Django? The Spaniards on the other end in Venezuela used to have black people sit there and fight against each other like that for entertainment. So when they sat there and had one person wrestle the other to death, as in the movie Django, as shown there, so did Domitian during the time of the Roman Empire had Israelites do that. So we want to take it from different angles to sit there and show the aspect of why we state what we state, brothers and sisters. Let's go on to the next slide. Genesis 37, Ketonet Pasim. Ketonet, brothers and sisters, in Hebrew means garment, also means like shirt more so. The word ketonet more so means shirt. The word pasim, brothers and sisters, means stripes. Shirt of stripes. Now in the Bible, when it speaks of Joseph's coat of many colors, and we already can see a shirt, which they translate as coat, which should not be, it should be shirt of many colors. Brothers and sisters, how were the Israelites dressing? For Jacob to make that for his son. Because that style that you see right there and all of that is not indigenous to said Egyptian. That's more so Asiatic. That's why you see, as we went over earlier with the people of the ancient Hyksos that were just a certain way. Let's go on to the next slide. Now here, I wanted to take the time out, brother and sister, to show how the European is not sit there and should not be the first and only source to break down the scriptures. Gary Greenberg is a Jewish man who tried to speak against the Torah, but he forgot something. We read. The first problem with this book, which you can also get on Amazon, the first problem is the fact the Bible, the word is not in the Bible. So when he calls this here the Bible myth, the word Bible is not in the Bible. That's one thing to point out. So how then can you call a book a myth when the name of that book, said as Bible, does not exist inside of that book? That's what we want to point out. Then he goes on to say the African origins of the Jewish people. Next is the word myth does not mean lie. The term Africa is not accredited to ancient Egypt. Israelites were not followers of Akhenaten. Jewish is from, pardon me, Jewish is not from a Hebrew word. So when he calls this book here in subtitle, The African Origins of the Jewish People, and a lot of people when I was in college was like, yo, that's written by a Jew. No, it was written by a descendant of the Khazars. And I told the teacher that. This is before I got my degree. I told the teacher that right there, that's not the real Jew in the first place. He's neither the indigenous African nor the indigenous house of Israel. So how can he be the one, the spokesperson for such? You understand? Now, in this book, he attempted to get into something that we want to expound upon right here. Explanation. It says in Genesis chapter 6:19, and of every living thing of all flesh, two of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female. Genesis chapter 7, verse 2. Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee 7 and 7, each with his mate. And of the beasts that are not clean, 2 and 2, each with his mate. Now, if your mind is okay with homosexuality, you're not going to understand this. If your mind is okay with that which is unclean, you're not going to understand this. So let's understand what Genesis chapter 6:19 is saying. It says, in quote, and of every living thing of all flesh, two of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female, two of every sort. And what does it say of every sort? They shall be male and female. But if you have a culture like the European Jewish people, like Gary Greenberg, where Tel Aviv in the land of Israel is the homosexual plot, like Atlanta is the homosexual plot in America, that wisdom is going to flee from you. It says in the book of Psalms, what hath the wicked to declare my statutes? So the fact that Genesis chapter 6 distinctly says two of every sort, and then it explains and tells you what that sort is. One is male, one is female. But when you live in with the LGBT, a boy can be a girl can be a boy mentality, brothers and sisters. And Zionism, which was promoted by the guy named Theodore Herzl, does not bash homosexuality. That's why the Jewish people that are heavy, brothers and sisters, inside of Hollywood are also heavy with homosexuality. In homosexuality, they view being called a male or a female as stereotyping or branding a person. Or you branded him a male or you branded her a female. That's why the wisdom that speaks of this, it doesn't appeal to certain people. You understand? That's why the Catholic Church, which is known for its homosexual and pedophilia acts, they would say, well, the Adam and Eve story wasn't real. Of course, the Catholic Church would say Adam and Eve story is not real because Adam is a man and Eve is a woman. And you said you, as a man, don't want a woman. So you can't understand Proverbs chapter 18:22 that says, he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor of the Most High. That wisdom doesn't come to you. You understand? That understanding cannot come to you. So that's why they will try to say, oh, that seems to be a contradiction because this says 2, and over here in Genesis 7, verse 2, it says 7. No. And when it says, O ye who do not like the fact of cleanliness, it says, in quotes, of every clean beasts that shall take to thee 7 and 7, each with his mates. His mate is the female. And of the beasts that are not clean, 2 and 2, each with his mate. So the unclean beasts, be they cub, tiger, lion, zebra, that went in, brothers and sisters, by twos. So 2 cubs or 2 lions with 2 female cubs or 2 female lionesses. Whereas you had 2 deer and 2 doe, because a doe is a female deer. Deer meat, venison is clean in the house of Israel. That's why you have to understand the laws of the Most High to understand the mind of the Most High. But if you don't understand the aspect of there's male and there's female, there's clean and there's unclean, Genesis 6:19 and Genesis 7:2 is not going to make sense to you. Oh, it seems contradictory. No, you have gay men's health crisis because your ways are contradictory to the Most High's laws. So of course you're going to have a gay men's health crisis. You go against the natural order of the Creator. It's not surprising that that kind of stuff is out there. You understand? Let's go on, if we will, to the next part. All right. Slavery in Egypt. And what is referred to as the papyrus of Ipura, we read of male and female slaves. And what is referred to as the papyrus of Brooklyn, 35.1446, we read of slaves in Egypt. And what is referred to as the papyrus Anastasia 5, we read of slaves in Egypt. Egypt of the Pharaohs, Sir Alan Gardiner, for those who wanted a reference. Slavery in Egypt. Slavery existed in Egypt. Not until the Middle Kingdom is there evidence of use of numbers of foreigners, Nubians and Asiatics as domestic slaves in Egypt. We should note that the Middle Kingdom was during the era of Dynasty 12 and 13, the same timing as the Ipura and Brooklyn papyri. The Torah is not from Egypt. The concept of saying that the Bible, in this case, namely the Torah, came from Egypt is not founded in Hebrew or Egyptian native thought. It was the thought of Masons after the European people took control over Egypt during the era of Napoleon. We must remember that the cult of Isis / Egyptian culture was widespread in Rome and other parts of Europe. Thus, when the Europeans saw other foreign things to them, they associated it with Egyptian culture. And this was pointed out by Jacqueline Hawks as we went over 2 weeks ago in part 2 of this presentation. Next slide. All righty. For all the people talking about Independence Day, July the 4th, let's see what happened and get into the history of this right here. Thomas Jefferson and Jefferson Davis, both of them were slave masters. Did you know that? Let's go on. Thomas Jefferson said, I fear for my country when I reflect God is just. As we went over in Moreh Yeshaya Torah Lessons channel, they knew something's coming and know something is coming. Now let's see, brothers and sisters, what Jefferson Davis said. we recognize the Negro as God and God's book and God's laws. And nature tell us to recognize him, our inferior, fitted expressly for servitude by Jefferson Davis. You can get that from the Library of Congress when you look up Jefferson Davis' statement. He was the president of the Confederacy. He stated, we recognize the Negro as God. So when we can begin to see and why they might be quote unquote called the devil, let's see what else was stated. And God's book and God's laws in nature tells us to recognize him, our inferior, fitted expressly for servitude. So if he said, brothers and sisters, that the Negro is God, according to him, and that he is expressly fit for servitude, who else would try to take who he would say is God down but the said devil? You understand? So this is something we want to sit there and take for edification purposes. Let's go on, please, for the next slide. Here we go. George Washington, part of the hero from 1776, and a painting in his house. George Washington, some other people, and we want to pay attention to this guy that we see right here. And I want to highlight this or color code this in a different color. Pen. In the red there. Who is that guy that we see right there? Can somebody please explain to me who is the gentleman that we're looking at right there? Because that right there, brothers and sisters, was George Washington's slave. So we can begin to see and understand what we're looking at for edification purposes. George Washington was a slave master. Did you know that? One of them is right there. Let's go on, if you will, to the next slide. This is the matter in 1776, according to one of the paintings, when they was having their Declaration of Independence, which they're going to be celebrating tomorrow in this country. They were saying they were independent from Britain. And when they came over here, they enslaved the people who were here. And when they couldn't enslave them no more, they decided it was a good idea to replace those who were enslaved here with people from Africa. Read about Bartolome Las Casas so you can understand. New York in 1776. So we can begin to see and know what we're talking about for edification purposes. All right? That right there is the area between Brooklyn and Manhattan. So we can begin to see, know, and grasp what these people, brothers and sisters, are celebrating when they are celebrating, quote, their independence. It had nothing to do with us as far as being a free people. In the year 1852, Frederick Douglass, may he rest in peace, he did a speech called What to the Slave is the 4th of July. It is of oppression. It is of being degraded, and it is of enslavement, brothers and sisters. That's what the 4th of July represented to the people who were slaves. Next slide. 1776. Normally, it was a city of thriving commerce, shipbuilding. Don't ask me about where the slave ships were at. Shipbuilding and seagoing trade. And with much to see and talk about, the inhabitants are in general brisk and lively. The women were handsome It rather hurts a European eye to see so many Negro slaves upon the streets. That's what somebody stated about New York in 1776. In 1776, in New York, we were already noted to be seen in quantities that were high as slaves in the streets. So when we talk about Independence Day, let's understand it was not our independence. You see this here? Long Island. You see this here? Flatbush, Bedford, Brooklyn. Brooklyn was part of Long Island. Did you know that? For those who are familiar with New York. That's how it was said to look in a map in 1776. Because Brooklyn was one of the territories that they was fighting over with the British. Because the British burned down half of what we call Brooklyn today, back then. Let's go on, if you will, to the next slide. Staten Island, The Kills, Bergen Point, Baraneck, Elizabethtown, Newark. You know what Newark is? That's in the state of Jersey, as we call it today. New York and New Jersey basically got their names from like the Dutch and the English in like the 1660s or so. You understand? Pardon me, no, the British, the English, not the Dutch. Because what's called New York was called New Amsterdam by the Dutch. Duke of York was when the English or the British named it in honor of him. And his brother got the honor by it being called New Jersey on the other side of the Hudson. All right, so let's go on, if we will, to the next slide. A scene from 1860. This is a particular picture that was shown in many, many cases, brothers and sisters, about the slave trade. This is the slave ship that was called Erie. All right? So we can begin to see and know for edification purposes. All right? Erie. That was the name of that particular slave ship. Next slide. The matter of the ship Erie. And on the harbor's restless water, a three-masted merchant vessel, tossed and buckled, tossed and bucked at her mooring lines. If you drew close, you might still have caught a whiff of the distinctive stench that every well-traveled mariner in that day and age knew, the reek of the close-packed bodies of human misery, of captivity and death. She was the slaver Erie, and she had recently come to New York as a captive herself. A U.S. naval vessel patrolling for ships engaged in the illicit trade had seized her off the mouth of the Congo River, which is in Africa, flinging open the hatches to the Congo hold. The officers saw a dim tangle of bodies moving in the darkness, packed so tightly that they seemed almost a single tormented soul. Nearly 900 Africans, half of them children, have been stripped naked and forced below decks. At the height of equatorial summer, aboard a vessel barely more than 100 feet long. Just a few days into their weeks-long voyage, a witness later recalled their sufferings were really agonizing. And the stench arising from their unchecked filthiness was absolutely startling. Even after their rescue, dozens died in a matter of days. Now, I want to emphasize that part right there. all right, for edification purposes. All right. Dozens died in a matter of days. And that's the reason why I refuse to not talk about what happened with our ancestors. Because I'm talking for those who have died. The matter with Erie, part 2. Like the majority of slavers at the time, the area had been bound for Cuba, where importation was still legal. Her human cargo might have fetched somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million there, depending, of course, on how many captives perished during the coursing. A mortality rate of 1 in 5 or so was taken for granted in the trade, but the Aries record on past voyages had been even worse than this horrific average. Still, enormous profits were to be made. The slavers' New England born captain, Nathaniel Gordon, had purchased the Africans with kegs of whiskey. He was now a prisoner in the El Ridge Street jail. Look up Nathaniel Gordon, because you will find out that he was put to death by the orders of Lincoln on the charge of slave trading. Still, we ain't quoted the Bible left and right, right? So when the Israelites only cite the Bible. Nope. Next slide, please. All right. I didn't go earlier into this, but I want to talk about this now. Most High willing, I'm going to complete a book in regards about us coming from Western and Central Africa in ships and brought over here to the Western Hemisphere. And this is part of the book that I copied and pasted from the sources I had that I'm going to use in the book for this. New York Times, 1861 slave ship list. You see it. 28 ships. And that's just talking about New York. The New York Times covered it. You know, the same New York Times that was really the only one talking about the Philistines in Ethiopia? Next slide. Vanderbilt and Morgan. These guys are interesting. Let's see why. Vanderbilt and Washington. Vanderbilt, born in 1794, dying in 1877. New York at the time had roughly 30,000 inhabitants. The slave trade in New York was prosperous for them then. Washington, the first president, died in 1799 and had a slave house in New York. The Samuel Osgood House was used by Washington as his home and base during his presidency, and it was a place where he had slaves. Vanderbilt was one who made the steamboat and later transportation widespread in New York and America. Why does that fit in? Because the steamships, the steamboats were used later on as part in the Atlantic slave trade. So if you can sit there and ask a black man today, where are all the slave ships? I can ask you, brothers and sisters, where are the ships that Vanderbilt was known for building and got rich on? See, this is why earlier we cited, we said normally it was a city of thriving commerce. It was thriving in main part due to the slave trade. So we can understand what we're talking about for edification purposes. All right? The Samuel Osgood House, right here. It was used as what they call the first presidential mansion. Next slide. Morgan and Chase and slavery. J.P. Morgan, Chase and Company. As reported by the BBC on 21st January 2005, J.P. Morgan admits U.S. slavery links. Thousands of slaves were accepted as collateral for loans by two banks that later became part of J.P. Morgan Chase. The admission is part of an apology sent to J.P. Morgan staff after the bank researched its links to slavery in order to meet legislation in Chicago. Citizens Bank and Canal Bank are the two lenders that were identified. They are now closed, but were linked to Bank One, which JP Morgan bought last year. About 13,000 slaves were used as loan collateral between, let's go in, 1831 and 1865. JP was born in 1837 and died in 1913. That guy was involved in that money, involved with the slave trade. So Chase Bank has its ties to the slave trade. Let's go on, if we will, brothers and sisters. This is available on Amazon. The books that you see here for those who are interested. Egypt Talking Writing, as we went over earlier and mentioning this. Hebrew is Easy, Old Testament Israelites Respond, and Deuteronomy 28, 15 to 68. History Untold to the Masses. There's a reason why I subtitled it that. Contact information. To reach me, call or text 908-587-4841. To donate to PayPal, hkashub@yahoo.com. That's the PayPal address for those who want to donate. All right? And there's nobody who happened to have bought a book that did not get the book, be it the old version or the updated version. Anyone who paid for their book directly from me, they got it. You understand? To get the books directly from me, you can contact me at the information as shown. kashuput@gmail.com or yyisrael@yahoo.com. All right? Are there any questions concerning what we've gone over in this particular presentation? Questions, comments, so forth and so on about this particular aspect? Okay. There will be links put inside of the description. And I will say at 9:30, the time I was hoping to have ended this, which I'm fairly on time with that. Say, Creator bless you. Shalom.